hallway trembled when the first boot slammed against Jonathan Kane's front door. "Open up or we'll break it down." Jonathan stood barefoot in his living room, coffee in hand, calm as winter ice. From outside came the enraged voice of the lead cop. "We know you're in there. Oh man, we gotta report somebody like you was trespassing." Jonathan didn't move. He had survived a dozen battlefields, hidden in jungles, deserts, war zones. But this absurd, racist challenge in his own New York apartment was somehow uglier. He whispered to himself. They picked the wrong door. A final booming kick. Wood cracked. The lock burst. The door flew inward. 3 cops stormed through, guns drawn, shouting, arrogant, convinced they were hunting a criminal. The youngest officer yelled, "Hands up, don't move." Jonathan just raised an eyebrow. He didn't lift his hands. He didn't step back. He didn't cower. He simply looked at them, steady, unflinching, while the broken doorframe creaked on its hinges. And in the stunned silence that followed, one thought hung in the air like smoke. They had no idea who he was. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, we want to thank you for your support, love, and kindness. We wouldn't have come this far without you. Subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue to bring you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The lead cop, Sergeant Blake, stepped forward, tall, broad, red-faced from fury. "You got identification? Or are you just hiding here?" Jonathan took a slow sip of coffee. "This is my home." Blake barked a laugh. "Yeah, right. A guy like you in a place like this? I don't think so. We got a call. Someone black was hanging around. Looked suspicious." Jonathan said nothing. The apartment was neat, quiet. Books on the shelves. Framed photographs. A folded American flag in glass. The younger officer, Matthews, sneered. "Where'd you get that flag?" "Steal it." Jonathan's eyes darkened, but he stayed silent. Blake shoved a shoulder into him. "Show ID. Now, or we take you in." Jonathan calmly walked toward the kitchen drawer. All 3 officers flinched, hands tightening on their weapons. "Stop moving." Blake grabbed Jonathan's arm. Age had silvered Jonathan's hair. Wrinkles creased his jaw. He looked like any quiet 55-year-old in the building. That was a mistake. They saw age. They saw skin color. They saw nothing else. Apartment doors cracked open. Curious, fearful eyes peered out. An elderly woman whispered, "He's harmless. He's the kindest man here." But the officers didn't care. Blake shouted, "Everyone stay inside. This is police business." He glared at Jonathan. "We got a report, and you match the description. Blackmail. That's enough." Jonathan spoke softly, but there was steel in his tone. "That's all it takes? My presence." Blake leaned in, inches from Jonathan's face. "In this building? Absolutely." Blake wrenched Jonathan's hands behind his back. Old pain flared through Jonathan's shoulders, old scars from old wars. He gritted his teeth. A neighbor gasped, "Officer, please. He's a veteran." Blake scoffed. "Sure, and I'm the president." The cops forced Jonathan toward the hallway, stepping over the splintered door they had destroyed. Jonathan's calm never broke. He had been surrounded by war. He had faced enemies who wanted him dead. These men weren't enemies. Not really. They were something else. Men who thought they had power. From the elevator came the sound of heels. Quick, sharp, a woman emerged, dressed in a tailored navy suit, briefcase in hand. Federal posture, federal silence. Her name was Angela Winter, age 42, assistant U.S. attorney. She lived on the 8th floor. She froze at the sight. 3 cops. Guns out, Jonathan restrained. What on earth is happening? Blake puffed his chest. We're detaining a suspect. Possible trespasser. Angela frowned. Jonathan Kane? He lives here. Blake smirked. You know him? Angela's voice cooled. Everyone in this building knows him, including the management. He's lived here for years. Blake shrugged. Doesn't look like someone who belongs here. Jonathan watched her carefully. There was power in her eyes, but she wasn't intervening yet. She was observing, waiting. Blake marched Jonathan to the elevator. The neighbor stared, silent, anxious. A boy whispered to his father, "Why are they arresting Mr. Kane?" The father answered quietly, "Because some people only see one thing." The elevator doors opened. Blake shoved Jonathan inside. The metal walls closed around them. Jonathan finally spoke. "You broke my door. You entered my home without a warrant." Blake snorted. "Don't need a warrant if we're responding to a threat." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "What threat?" Matthew sneered. "A black man in a wealthy building. That's threat enough for some folks." Jonathan gazed at him. "Is that your training or your insecurity?" Blake slammed Jonathan against the wall. "Watch your mouth." Jonathan didn't flinch. The elevator opened into the marble lobby. Residents were gathered. Some were crying. Others were filming. Jonathan's shoulders tightened. One rule had defined his life. Never let innocent people get hurt because of you. He didn't care about himself. He cared about them. Blake dragged him across the floor. People stared at the bruises forming on Jonathan's wrists. An older man whispered, "He doesn't deserve this." Angela Winter stepped out after them. She spoke clearly. "Sergeant Blake, may I ask what the charge is?" Blake spit the answer. "Suspicion." Angela folded her arms. "Suspicion of what?" Blake shrugged. "We'll figure out at the station." Angela tilted her head. "Which station?" Blake blinked. "Excuse me." She repeated, colder. "Which precinct are you taking a man with no stated crime, no warrant, and no probable cause?" The lobby fell silent. Blake didn't answer. Jonathan finally met her eyes. There was something in his gaze, a shared understanding. They still didn't know who he was, but she was starting to suspect. Through the glass doors, a black unmarked SUV idled at the curb. Two men in suits stood beside it. Blake noticed them and laughed. "Great, the feds are everywhere today." Angela raised an eyebrow. "They're not here for me." Blake shrugged. "Probably here for someone who doesn't belong in the neighborhood." Jonathan's voice dropped. "You're very sure a lot of things you don't know." Blake sneered. "Oh, I know enough. You're coming with us." Matthews cuffed Jonathan tighter. "Let's go." Jonathan spoke quietly. "Careful. This is your last chance to rethink this." Blake smirked. "Or what? You're gonna fight back? Try to be a tough guy?" Jonathan stepped toward the sunlight, and the doors opened. The two men in suits looked up. Their expressions changed instantly. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition. They snapped to attention. "Commander Kane." Blake froze. The lobby froze. Even Angela inhaled sharply. Jonathan stopped walking. He turned slowly to face the officers holding him. "Now do you understand?" The senior suited man spoke. "Sir, are you all right?" Jonathan nodded. "They broke my door." The man's jaw tightened. "We were coming to discuss important matters with you, but it appears local law enforcement has made a mistake." Blake tried to bluff. "Who are you?" The suited man showed a badge. No flash, no flourish, just quiet authority. Department of Defense, Counterterror Division. Blake swallowed. Matthews went pale. The suited man continued. "And this man is not just a resident. He is Commander Jonathan Kane, Delta Force, retired, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart." Whispers rippled through the lobby. Neighbors gasped. Jonathan stood calm. The suited man added, voice like iron, "He is one of the most decorated special operations commanders in modern history." Blake whispered, He never said." Jonathan looked at him. "You never asked." Neighbors stepped forward. The elderly woman spoke, firm. "You were dragging a hero through the lobby like a criminal." A teenager pointed. "You broke his door." Blake tried to regain control. "We got a call," someone said. Angela Winter cut him off. "Someone said they saw a black man. That was enough for you." Blake stuttered. We didn't know who he was." Jonathan's voice was quiet, deadly. "So if I was nobody, this treatment would be fine?" No answer. Every word echoed. Jonathan continued. What you did was wrong. Not because of who I am, but because of who you chose to see me as. Matthew's face burned red. We were doing our job. Jonathan stared at him. Were you? Or were you doing your bias? Silence. The suited man turned to Jonathan. Sir, would you like us to press charges? Jonathan took a breath. He could have crushed them. Legally, professionally, socially. But vengeance was not the lesson. Jonathan looked at the crowd. Their faces held anger, fear, shame. Finally, he said, No, not yet. People learn best when they face themselves. Blake whispered, What does that mean? Jonathan stepped closer, voice low. You told me I didn't belong. Remember that feeling. Learn from it, because someday someone might tell you that you don't belong. Blake's throat tightened. Jonathan continued, And if that day comes, I hope the person on the other side is kinder than you were. The lobby was silent. The words landed heavier than any punishment. Angela Winter approached Jonathan. Commander Kane, are you sure you don't want to take legal action? Jonathan looked at the two suited men. Not yet, but I want my door fixed. Immediately, not tomorrow. Today. Blake nodded quickly. Of course. We'll send a team. Jonathan's voice sharpened. No, you will fix it with your hands. You broke it. You repair it. Blake froze. Faces turned toward him. He looked at the broken frame upstairs. Jonathan's voice softened, but the steel remained. And when you are done, you will knock before you enter another man's home, because respect begins at the door. Blake swallowed. Yes, sir. Jonathan wasn't their commander, but he spoke like one. The suited men stood behind Jonathan. Angela Winter stood beside him. The neighbors watched in reverent silence. Blake and Matthew stood ashamed, tools already being fetched. And Jonathan Kane, Delta Force legend, turned away from them all toward a shattered doorway upstairs. The battle wasn't over. This was only the beginning, because the world needed a lesson, and Jonathan Kane was ready to teach it. The hallway smelled of splintered wood and sawdust. Sergeant Blake knelt on the floor, hammer in hand, sweat forming along his hairline. Jonathan Kane stood beside him, calm, upright, watching. Dominance had shifted quietly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was earned. Matthews held a box of nails, glancing nervously at the neighbors who occasionally passed by. Every face carried the same expression. Disbelief. The man they had mocked, the man they had shoved, the man they assumed didn't belong, was now standing over them like a silent general. Angela Winter leaned against a railing, arms folded, observing every movement. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Authority radiated from her very posture. The two DOD agents waited patiently at the lobby entrance, eyes sharp, watching over Jonathan like guardians. No guns, no threats, just presence. Jonathan spoke quietly. Lift the hinge higher. Otherwise, the door won't align. Blake corrected his angle immediately. He didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes. He obeyed. And the neighbors watched, the former arrogance dissolving into something like respect, something like shame. A whisper ran through the hallway. He's teaching them. When the frame was finally aligned, Jonathan reached out and steadied the wood with his hand. Old scars crossed his knuckles. Small white lines, maps of old wars. Blake noticed. Sir, were you hurt overseas? Jonathan didn't look up. Several times. He didn't boast. He didn't explain. But there was a quiet gravity in his voice that made Blake swallow hard. Matthews asked hesitantly, What did you do in Delta Force? Jonathan's reply was simple. Whatever needed to be done. The answer hung between them like a shadow. He wasn't bragging. It was truth, a truth they hadn't earned. Not yet. When the last screw went into the last hinge, Jonathan tested the door. It swung cleanly, perfectly. He nodded once. Blake exhaled in relief. Then Jonathan stepped outside into the hallway and stood tall. His voice carried, not loud, but powerful enough to fill the space. Now knock. Blake froze. Jonathan didn't move. You broke this door with violence. Now practice entering with respect. Matthews looked away, embarrassed. Blake lifted his hand and knocked. 3 small knocks. Respectful. Measured. Jonathan waited. The hallway held its breath. Then he answered, "Come in." The door opened. The cops entered. Slow, careful, humbled. Jonathan let the silence stretch. Every neighbor who watched understood. They were not the same men who had stormed in earlier. They had entered as tyrants. They were learning to leave as humans. When the crowd dispersed and the door closed behind them, Jonathan gestured toward the kitchen table. "Sit." They sat. A strange reversal. 2 armed police officers sitting like schoolboys at a principal's desk. Jonathan placed 3 cups of coffee down. No sugar, no cream, just heat. Blake wrapped his hands around the mug, unsure if he deserved it. Jonathan sat across from them. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "Do you understand what you did today?" Matthews mumbled. "We responded to a call. We thought." Jonathan cut him off. "You didn't think. You assumed. You decided who I was before asking anything. That's dangerous." He turned his gaze to Blake. "You wanted to believe I didn't belong. You wanted a criminal. And so you forced me into the role." Blake's jaw clenched. Jonathan continued. "You didn't break my door because of evidence. You broke it because of fear and pride." Blake swallowed. "We made a mistake." Jonathan shook his head. "No, a mistake is accidental. This was choice, but you have a chance to choose again." Matthews whispered, "Sir, how did you stay calm? When we pushed you, when we cuffed you." Jonathan lifted his coffee. "On the battlefield, panic kills. Calm saves lives." They listened. He leaned forward. "But here, calm teaches." Angela re-entered the apartment, heels clicking against the clean floor. "Commander Kane, may I join you?" Jonathan nodded. She sat, her presence sharpening the room. Blake spoke quickly, nervous. "Ma'am, we didn't know." She raised a hand. "That's the point. You didn't know, but you acted like you did. The danger of power is assuming you always understand what you're seeing." Matthew stared into his cup. Angela continued. "The city needs officers who protect, not officers who presume." Jonathan sipped his coffee. "She's right." Jonathan stood. He moved slowly to a display cabinet against the far wall. There was no showmanship. He opened it. Inside were 3 framed medals. He lifted one carefully and set it on the table. Blake read the inscription aloud. "Distinguished Service Cross." His voice cracked. Jonathan laid down the second. Matthews whispered, "Silver Star." He laid down the third. Angela's eyes softened. Purple Heart. Jonathan sat again. "I did not hang these here for others to see. They're reminders for me, not trophies. Memories." He met the officer's eyes. "I didn't tell you who I was today, because I wanted you to see who you were." Silence. Heavy. Necessary. Blake swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir." Jonathan nodded. "Apology is not enough. Learn. Change. Teach the next officer who acts like you today." An hour later, Jonathan stepped outside. The hallway was packed. Neighbors waited. Quiet. Anxious. Someone whispered, "What happened?" Jonathan spoke clearly. "The officers repaired my door. We shared coffee. We spoke about respect." A teenager raised his hand nervously. "Are you mad at them?" Jonathan looked around at all the faces. He chose truth. "Yes, but anger alone is useless. Change is what matters." A woman asked, "Did they apologize?" Jonathan nodded. "They did, and I accepted." The crowd murmured. Someone clapped. Then more. A wave of applause filled the floor. Blake and Matthew stepped forward, no weapons visible. Their faces were red. Their shoulders were low. They weren't hiding. They were accepting. Jonathan placed a hand briefly on Blake's shoulder, a gesture of grace. The lobby softened. The next morning at dawn, Blake and Matthews returned. No command, no patrol, just tools. They knocked. Jonathan opened the door. Blake lifted a bag. "We wanted to repaint the frame. It still looks damaged." Jonathan nodded. "Come in." For hours, they worked. Painting, sanding, cleaning. Neighbors passed by, watching. Some brought food. Some spoke quietly to the officers. An old man said, "Takes courage to come back." Blake nodded. "Takes more to fix what we break." By sunset, the door gleamed. Jonathan stood beside it. "Good work." Matthews asked softly, "Sir, is there anything else we can do?" Jonathan looked them both in the eye. "Remember this day, and never enter another home the way you enter mine." They nodded. Jonathan added, "And when you see someone who looks like me, see the human first." Blake's eyes glistened. "We will." Weeks passed. Life returned to normal. Neighbors greeted Jonathan with deeper respect. Children waved from the elevator. Angela visited on weekends, bringing pastries and stories. One afternoon, Blake and Matthews returned again, not with tools, not with fear, with flowers. Blake cleared his throat. "Sir, we wanted to thank you, because that day changed us." Jonathan smiled. Then it wasn't wasted. They stood together, quiet, grateful. As the elevator doors closed behind the two officers, a neighbor whispered, "Funny, isn't it? They came here thinking he didn't belong." The elderly woman replied, "But it was them who had to earn their place." In the months that followed, people still talked about what happened on the top floor, not because of the violence, not because of the medals, not because of the drama, but because of the lesson. Power is not the right to break through doors. Power is the strength to knock, wait, and listen. Respect is the true weapon of civilized men. And every time someone passed Jonathan Kane's door, freshly painted, straight, solid, they remembered, it is easy to judge a man by how he looks. It takes wisdom to know who he truly is. The world becomes safer, gentler, more human when we choose wisdom.